I don't see the marker. There it goes. Good luck to us.
Welcome, everybody, to today's session. I'm happy to see that you're joining us again. This is, I think, our fourth in our career workshop series, and we're planning to do many more on a weekly basis. And one of the things to know is that this is going to be recorded. So for those of you that are watching this afterwards, welcome as well. Today, we will be speaking about resume writing tactics for mid and senior level professionals. These are tactics. They are guideposts more than they are specific writing tips, and they will focus on how your resume is received by an interviewer. If you walk away with anything from this, that ought to be the one thing. Feel free during this session to write comments and questions during the presentation, and we will address them at the end. By way of introduction, I'd like to let you know that I lead Flycast Executive Search. We are a boutique executive search company focused on the consulting and software industries. Personally, I've helped companies like Bain, BCG, Accenture, and others hire executives, but more importantly for this session, I have spoken with, counseled, and placed thousands of executive job seekers over a long career. Jonathan Phillips is here with me. Do you want to introduce yourself, Jonathan?
Yeah, happy to. I'm CEO of Magellan International, which I started after spending 10 years at Shell. So I jumped from working in industry to starting search, and I've loved it. It's been great. We also work in professional services, and we also build services groups in Fortune 500 firms. And over the years, we've probably worked with most of the major consulting firms and dozens of Fortune 500 clients.
Great. Thank you for that, Jonathan. And let's see. So we're going to start with the question, which may seem obvious to start with, but I think it's a really important question to ask before we get into how do you actually create a resume. What is a resume for? So, Jonathan, I'm going to throw these individual topics out to you for comment. So, number one, a resume is for opening the door to the conversation.
Yeah, what you really want to do is put you put in the resume the things you think are important to you. And what the resume is supposed to accomplish is to generate interest on the part of the person you're sharing it with. So what is it for? It's for sharing and creating a document to start a conversation that reflects your interests and should also be relevant to the person that is looking at your resume.
Okay, a resume is for preventing a false negative selection.
Yeah, very important that you put in the resume what you've really done, your accomplishments, the things that have been done in reverse chronologic order, which is always the easiest for the interviewer. Where have you worked most recently? Make sure you've got the titles, make sure you've got quantifiable accomplishments so that the person doing the interviewing can see exactly what you've done. That way they can frame your experience with their needs.
Yeah, and one of the things that you really want to do here is not create something that's going to create a problem, right? So don't trip yourself up by creating a resume that has you selected out of something that you might be good for. And we'll talk about how to do that a little bit later in the discussion. A resume is a guide for your interviewer.
What you want is for the person that's going to begin talking to you to use your resume to pick up keywords and topics important to them from their posting and their job, the keywords, but also keywords that you use that are important to you for accomplishments that will demonstrate how you can effectively help them because you've planned. You've looked at the website, you've looked at the description, you know pretty much what they're looking for. That way you can concentrate on getting to know the person who's interviewing. They'll pick a topic, you'll respond, you can watch how they respond and make the conversation far more productive.
And one of the things that I do is I will look at a resume and I'll, not always, but a lot of times I'll use it to kind of walk through somebody's career and use that as a way to kind of orient myself with the person that I'm speaking with. A resume is a document of last resort.
Okay. So particularly for senior executives, they're going to look at all of your media. They're going to look at your background in LinkedIn. They're going to look at wherever your bio's posted on other company websites. They're going to have some sense of who you are when you walk in. What the resume is for is to make sure nothing gets missed. So if in the conversation there's something you'd like them to ask you, refer to it in your resume and say, look, I actually did this project, which I think is very important for what your company's trying to accomplish now. The other interesting last resort thing is probably almost more important. At the bottom of your resume, put down things you're interested in, sort of patents, papers, publications, only those things relevant to the company, but also hobbies and things you're personally interested in. Remember, when you interview, you have two objectives: move forward in the process and build a relationship, an advocative relationship with the person who is interviewing you.
That I absolutely right. And we have a guest that's going to be joining us next week who will also be able to comment on this topic. It is a document that you use to apply for jobs. And a lot of times, at least from our perspective, that's typically the most low probability way to find a position is actually by applying online. But we're not as sure of that as our guest next week will be, and we'll look forward to letting you know about that, and hopefully you'll be joining us then. Finally, a resume is not a marketing document, but keeps your goals in mind. This one's a little bit more subtle. What do you think about that?
I agree completely. You should think about the person, the company, and the position you're interviewing for, and make sure what's in your resume is addressably interesting for them. You don't want to put in your resume things that are just interesting to you. While it's nice for you to know what you're interested in doing long term, the objective in any interview is to move forward in the hiring process, which is aimed at a job, not a career. Again, topic for a later discussion, but you want to stay focused on the job, focus on the person, focus on the company, and be sure that you're not just presenting them some piece of marketing stuff that's interesting to you, but not necessarily to them.
Okay, that's our rapid fire round.
That was fun.
Okay, so all right, so we've gotten past that. So now what do you do? So you know all of this now. I'm sure that you've all absorbed all of that in the last 5 minutes or 4 minutes or whatever. But now what do you do? How do you actually set up your resume, and what things should you keep in mind when writing your resume? Why don't you take number one, Jonathan? I'll take number two.
Yeah, it's really critical. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Could never be truer, particularly in a job search. So you know where you want to go long term with your career, which is a slightly different thing than a job per se. But you do have to interview to get a job to move your career forward. What is it you want to do? So that when you understand your purpose and you understand why you're in this interview and you understand why this particular job is going to be added to your resume asset, it really comes across in the interview. That clarity of purpose comes across in all sorts of subtle verbal and nonverbal cues that go way beyond just the specific answers to specific questions. Have in mind what you're trying to accomplish when you walk in. It'll give you a sense of confidence during the interview, and that's helpful.
All right. Write to your audience. I think this is really pretty similar to what it is that you described. But in this case, it's not just about what you want, but really it is thinking about who it is that you're speaking to. So in this case, you're thinking about the business reason that the person has for hiring you and what kind of problem you are going to be solving for them, and then writing to that individual problem. And you don't want to write a new resume for every single job that you're applying for, but it is a good idea to have this in mind when writing your resume. Number three.
Absolutely. You want people to look at what you've actually accomplished: size, scale, scope, impact, revenue, target values, all the things that would tell someone the size of what you've actually done. So when you're interviewing and you can't quantify everything in your resume, but you want to use action words: managed, developed, built a procedure for, built the workflow process for. So even if you don't have a metric, a number associated with an accomplishment, do put down the action words that clearly demonstrate your level of impact in that particular accomplishment. That will often generate very good interview questions that you can then follow up with to talk about different behavioral attributes associated with that accomplishment also.
Yeah, this is such a critical one. I couldn't emphasize that enough. People ask, how long should my resume be? 1.5 to 2 pages. If you're mid or senior level professional, you're not going to keep anybody's attention past that, so there's no point. If you have a significant number of accomplishments. If you've been in business for 10, 15 years, then you'll probably have more than one page to fill. So stick to that guide and you should be in good shape.
We talk about clarity. I often ask people to write 2 resumes. Write a resume for themselves. What is the resume that's important to you? And that's often somewhat creative. And it's also often revealing to the things they want to do, but it's more of a marketing document. I like creativity. Write the first one for yourself, but clarity, the second resume you write, the clarity needs to be focused with keywords specifically aimed at the job, the company, and the person that you're going to be interviewing with. That clarity is critical. Also, could be concise. In the last 3 positions, put your top 3 accomplishments to keep the resume from getting long. But most resume readers and interviewers, they'll glance at the document, they'll look at 1 or 2 things underneath a role you had, and they'll ask questions about that. Most important accomplishments at the top, make sure there are at least 3 for the last 3 roles you've had. That keeps things moving, and it generates an enormous amount of clarity of purpose in what you're interested in having the interviewer ask you about.
Great. Excellent. Check grammar, spelling, and punctuation.
A combination of function and punctuation.
Yeah. We noticed this error just as we were going live, and figured it was probably something kind of funny to keep in, because it's very easy to miss something. And so go over it yourself, use spell check, look at the grammar suggestions, but make sure this is something that can knock you out of the water. One spelling error is usually allowed. We get 2, and I've had clients just say, no, I'm not interested in this person. They don't seem to be able to pay attention to detail. It can be serious.
And Jason brought up a point when we were sort of in our pre-meeting. If you notice, punctuation's not underlined in red here. If you send someone a Word document, lots of people are going to look at stuff online. All your errors are going to be underlined in blue and red. That's why use PDF format is our next topic. Once you've committed to the way you want your document to look, you want them to focus on the information content, not the grammar or mistakes that may or may not be in it. So convert it to a PDF. So if they're looking electronically, the document appears clean. It's just that simple.
Great. All right. Is absolutely true, and easy to scroll through as well.
Yep.
Apart from asking somebody to review your resume, to take a look, to check for grammar or punctuation, whether it's readable, whether you've quantified things, whether you're writing to your audience, all of the things that we've listed here today, it's a good idea to use it to have somebody interview you. Somebody, especially that doesn't know your field. Because if they know what to ask you based on your resume, if they understand what it is that you do based on your resume, then you've written a good resume. If it's something that's filled with jargon, with what do you call it, acronyms and things like that, then you may be writing to the wrong audience, and that's something to be aware of. There's one way to check is by having somebody that you know review it and ask you some questions, to a fake interview, practice interview. And finally,
I think it's important to tell them who you are, not just what you've done. It's okay to put all those things in, but those things, interest awards, papers, certifications, have to be relevant to the person, the job, and the company you're interviewing. So your resume should be tailored to each interview prior to doing it. Don't just pick a generic version of your resume that has everything. Don't do that. Pick the things that are relevant to the company you're going in to talk to, and your life will be a lot easier, and you'll get a lot farther in the job hiring process.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So thank you very much for joining us today. We have a couple of things that are coming up. Next week, we're going to be joined by Scott Hager. He is a VP of HR and recruiting for Protiviti. It's a consulting firm that grew very rapidly, and he oversaw that. And he's going to be speaking with us about applying for positions online. Should you, shouldn't you? What are best practices? How do you get the attention of hiring managers, recruiting managers, and things like that? He's been at this for a while and did a great job building this organization. It's going to be a special event, and hopefully you'll be able to join us. We're also going to be giving a talk probably the following week about using LinkedIn and peeking behind the covers as to how recruiters use LinkedIn, and we use it very differently than the standard kind of using LinkedIn to find somebody in general, professional contact. So again, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
That would be fun. And again, Jason and I are trying to keep this presentation format, conversational and fairly informal. If you've got questions or you'd like to see a recording of this later, don't hesitate to reach out to either of us anytime. The more formal stuff we do is quite a bit different. Enjoy doing that also. But we're really doing this series to help people who are kind of in the middle of the job search business and just want to try and help.
All right. Thanks very much, everybody. See you next time.
If we get any questions,